Welcome! Yes, we have a different intro. So again, I'm Brenda Bates, Medicine Woman.
And I'm Jen Toffel, Medicine Woman.
So we are learning a lot about the radio. We have Blogtalk and have been wonderfully doing this for at least over a year, I believe. I don't remember when I started. But we have also been picked up by Sepia. And if you would go to www.sepia, it's SEPIANC, for North Carolina.com. And it is a paranormal radio station, but it's 24 hours. 24 hours. And one of the managers asked us if we'd like to be doing our show, and so we feel like God is guiding us to bring light into another area of the world. So I think that's wonderful. So it's exciting. So our debut of that is tonight.
Yes.
And what time?
7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
Yep, so that's good. So we're going to do our blog talk show during the day and then our show at night, and they are both Medicine Women Reveal. So we want to thank everybody in the chat room and anybody that's calling in. And if you've called in, please remember to press the number 1 twice so that we can see that you raise your hand. Otherwise, thank you for calling in and listening. So here's been an event. It was fun making our intro. We've never done one before, and we have to make one for Sepia Radio. And what was interesting was hearing our own voices. I mean, I listen back with the radio show, and I watch the videos that we make, because we tape the videos of our blog talk shows so that people that want to visually just watch and see how behind the scenes of how we operate, it's there for you. But listening to it, it was kind of funny. I don't know why it's so different. Did you feel it was different?
Yeah, I had, it's different for whatever reason, listening to the intro in that way, knowing that besides the fact that we've been on the air for over a year doing this, but now we're going into a different realm. Now all of a sudden we're having an introduction for a specific, for
getting more serious now.
Getting more serious for a specific purpose and all that kind of stuff, and just listening to my voice and thinking, oh wow, people are really going to hear my voice that way. They've been hearing it for a year.
Yes, that's what's funny. So we did a promo, so we will show you that later. We're learning that when radio show, it's important to give breaks to the audience, and so we will take a couple breaks learning how to train ourselves into the etiquette of radio listeners and radio people. So it's just interesting to me how this all works. But we decided last night to create our own intros and promos and outros, and didn't know outro was a word until I learned that the other day. Makes sense, intro, outro. We have one, but it doesn't really advertise Blog Talk, so we have to make one specifically for Blog Talk, so we will. And then I probably will convert Wednesday's show into Medicine Woman Reveal, as well, so that we very much can stay consistent in all that we do. Because it is the same thing, except for I did my best to want to talk more about spirituality and spiritual practices, and sometimes I get to do that, and then sometimes it's just like Monday's show. So when you're ready to change in your world, one of the main things that you should do that will actually help you. It's not a should. It's not something that's going to force you, but it's an option, and it is using cards, because mainly I like the Colette Baring Reid, the Enchanted Map cards, because they have more meat to the bones about certain things that you need to heal, certain directions that you need to look at, give another perspective. This is the kind of deck I would be creating. Part of me is like, well, it's already created. I don't need to do it. And then there is the, let's see, there's other cards. I like the relationship cards by Duran Virtue, the purpose cards and healing cards. And then, there's all different forms. So we have the tarot deck, which is really, it's old. And the origin of it is more people are like, we're taught to be afraid of it. But it was supposed to be stayed hidden, because from the information that I was given was that in the times of rulers, if you weren't practicing the religion that they were, then they will give you the Inquisition, like the Spanish Inquisition and all of those. They really test you and make sure you are behaving in their society the way that they want you to.
Right. I mean, there was a state religion. The emperor had complete control, and anything that went against this state was really wiped out.
And so in order to not lose the spiritual knowledge that is behind the tarot cards, and what's very interesting is that these knowledge, I mean, it goes from the baby step to the evolution of, oh, you finally get it, you mastering it. So there's all these cards that show you the different directions of how, I didn't get it. Oh, maybe more insight to learning more. There's good advice. There is, maybe you're doing it in the shadow aspect. Maybe you need to look at it from this point of view. There's a lot of good things about the tarot deck. But I was taught as I was growing up that it's evil, not by my family, but by society, by the group consciousness that's always pushing on who we are supposed to be in this dimensional moment. So I find it interesting to, because I said, okay, God, show me, why is it you want me to learn about tarot, and yet I feel this scaredness? And again, it is the pressure of the vibration of the consciousness that's there. And so when you didn't want all of that truth to be lost, they put it into cards instead of book form, and then they gave it to the gypsies and says, here. I mean, most people were probably more afraid of the nomad gypsies because they were the ones that rebelled against, I'm not going to follow your society, I'm going to create my own. So pretty much they had to constantly keep traveling to protect themselves. But how they used it was the way they used it. But there still is that foundation that the information is there. So it depends on how you define it. It depends on how you use it. You even were talking about tarot, how you it opened your eyes. I can't remember what you were listening to. But you'll learn some more about that tarot where it's just information that's there.
Correct.
And she's trying to remember. My fault. My bad. I didn't know they were going to talk about it. But it's just very simple. It's very good. But then we have the angel cards. Angels. I cannot get over how many people are so deathly afraid of angels. I was watching the Supernatural, and their point of view, if you ever watch a Supernatural show, which is on a W, I think, but what it is the two guys are born into this world and to be fighting off the dark, the shadow. And their definition of the dark and the shadow is very scary and all of this. But, they have to end up fighting off Lucifer, which is the angel that's fallen, and that they portray him as that he's throwing a tantrum. And and then St. Michael has to come and put his brother in alignment, so who do you obey? Which father do you obey? So it's really looking at the angels. And then there's the, oh my God, I don't know, because what if the devil shows up as an angel? How do you follow that truth? And all this is based on fear. And fear is that part of our limbic brain, the emotional brain, but we have to update that limbic brain. We have to update the fight, flight, freeze mechanism. We need to really update it by resolving it, healing it, creating closure to things that don't need to be. We forget or don't even realize that we're sensory beings, which means what?
We have to use our senses to be able to interpret and make sense of our world.
Exactly. To make sense of our world. Most people say, well, I don't need to know that. But when you get thrown off your center, the first thing you do as a human is doing what?
Well, can you see? Can you hear what's going on? Is there...
I gotta make sense of this. I can't process it.
Right. And so some people, if they've gone through a trauma or whatever, there's a fragrance that the next time that they smell that triggers where we don't realize we are taking in the world in that.
Yeah,
way.
I mean, there's like 4 billion bits of information, and we only take in 150 bits, which is incredibly different, and the rest of it is recorded into our recorder, which is the soul and the subconscious mind. But when we then get thrown off center, then we create a strategy to use false self-assuredness, to scramble, to use the logical. But we forget that we start off in this world as babies. And babies don't have that logical sense. It starts to develop around age 3, the RTJP, which is the right temporal junction parietal lobe, which helps you think what other people think. It's then kicking in so you can observe and notice that there's people besides you, and that there's stuff that you need to know that you didn't know, and you self-conscious, or I say self-conscious, of, oh, people are looking at me, doesn't really kick in. It can then, but it doesn't usually kick in until a little older. But then you get a little bit more wiser, and you logically start figuring it out that there's, it's not just that fault out there. You realize there's more people that play into this, and then eventually you figure out that you are playing into this. But when you are listening to the subconscious mind and the soul, you are always the one interpreting. You're always the one experiencing that moment. So you have a part to play in your reality. And so when you're helping people to heal, they don't want to think there's they're any part of it and that they're the fault of it. Now, we're not saying fault. There's a big difference when you're the observer. When you understand starting who you are, then it's not about blame and fault. It really isn't. But when you're in that human mindset, the 80% of your blood leaves your forebrain. And so you have 20% of blood to help you scramble to create your reality in your forebrain, and then you relay back to the limbic fear brain, and then you're constantly looking at your strategies, your patterns, all these things that are created when you're a baby. All your first moments up until the age of 7, all these first moments of response, and then you learn by the imprint and the modeling, and you look at others and the environment you're in, and you learn how to get definitions for words and what certain things mean just based on observing. But when you start to chronological age, you don't realize that those really, really affect you. They'll say, oh, I outgrown it. Well, it's still part of your foundation, and if you still see crap hitting the fan, then that soul part of you is telling you, you want to keep creating like this because we need that life force to create something better for you. But we can't create something better for you because that part is being used over here. So simply, we bring it to the surface. You do it anyway. And if you're bringing it up and you got hell in your face, you may as well use a healing tool to take charge of your life.
I was going to go back to what you were saying about angels, because you were talking about angel cards.
Yeah.
People being afraid of angels. I have a person in my world, a friend, who said who has a baby and couldn't get the baby to sleep and all this kind of stuff. And I said, well, have you thought about? And they're not really a religious person, spiritual, but I don't know how spiritual. But anyway, so I said, well, have you considered asking for help when the baby's in the crib? When you're not there, and you want to have that time so that the baby starts to learn to soothe themselves and figure out how to create their own routine. It's not that you're not there, it's just that they can't grow to be dependent on you and latched on to you 24 hours a day so that you get a break too.
You got to create those boundaries and independence.
Can you imagine that there's angels or that kind of thing that would actually be able to help and be present? I mean, they're already there. In my world, I know they're already there. It's just tapping into that. And I said, and I think the way I phrased it was something like divine intervention. And that phrase, divine intervention, triggered something. She said, well, I'm not worthy enough.
Oh, well, yeah, that's what we're taught,
and especially when because I didn't say, hey, ask angels for help. I actually said divine intervention. And for me, those terms are interchangeable. Mm-hmm. But I understand that saying, well, divine intervention, that phrase unlocks a lot of things for people.
Right, because your definition is different than what the group consciousness is, as well as each other individual people. And that's why one of the spiritual practices is that we teach people to look and define their world. You already know your world. You just don't know how you know it. And when you start to understand how you know it, and then you can use healing tools to sculpt your world, you'd be so amazed with yourself. And you're like, why did I wait so long? But that fear brain says, oh my God, what if? Who will I be? It makes you stand in the fear, and it separates yourself from your true self, which is your spiritual self. But and part of the awakening is to bring you back to doing this, is to taking and understanding that you are a spiritual being and living in a human body and creating a reality together. Our soul chose to do this, so there's nobody here to blame.